Hanukkah Sameach. Welcome and thank you to everyone for joining us for our webinar, HaNissim Talmudic or Maccabean with Rabbi Professor Reuven Kimelman. Please note that this program is being recorded. Also, everyone is muted, but we welcome thoughts, comments, and questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to address questions at the end. My name is Scott Kalmakoff, and I am the coordinator for the Union for Traditional Judaism. Thank you to our sponsors for this program. At the benefactor level, we have Juan Mesa Freidel in honor of Rabbi Reuven Kimelman, his teacher 22 years ago in the Wexner Heritage Program. Also, our friends and anonymous donor, Lillian Gradovsky and Rabbi Noah Gradovsky in commemoration of the upcoming yahrzeit of Melvin Gradovsky, Leslie Kersner in celebration of her new grandson, Evan, Mitch Morrison in memory of his parents, Reuben and Helen Morrison, who were married on Hanukkah, and Rabbi Deborah Rennert in celebration of Hanukkah. We'd also like to thank everybody who made a donation along with registering for this program. For those of you who are new to UTJ, let me add a few words of introduction to our organization. The Union for Traditional Judaism, the UTJ, is a group of rabbis, scholars, and lay people who advocate for a passionate, open-minded approach to Torah study and observance of Jewish law, rooted in classical religious sources and informed by modern scholarship. Our philosophy is distinguished by the symbiotic relationship between faith in the God-given Torah and intellectual integrity, and our emphasis on the sacred framework of halakha as our unifying. Finally, let me introduce our speaker, Rabbi Professor Reuven Kimelman. Reuven Kimelman is a professor of classical Judaic at Brandeis University and rabbi at Beth Abraham Sephardic Congregation of New England. He specializes in the history of classical Judaism with a focus on the history and poetics of the Jewish liturgy. His forthcoming study of that is called The Rhetoric of Jewish Prayer, a historical and literary commentary on the daily prayer book. We hope to provide everyone with the opportunity to purchase this book at a pre-publication price. Stay tuned on your emails for details. His other book is called The Mystical Meaning of Lecha Dodi and Kabbalat Shabbat. Professor Kimelman's other writings focus on the interaction between Judaism and Christianity, on the ethics of war, and on his mentor, Abraham Joshua Heschel. Rabbi Kimelman, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you so very much. Chag Urim Sameach. Okay, everybody should have a copy of the text. We're going to study the text of HaNissim and also the text of the Book of Maccabees, and then the Talmudic report and legislation with regard to Hanukkah, and see how the three converge or diverge. We begin with the prayer HaNissim. HaNissim is inserted into the prayer of Modim. With regard to Hoda'ah, it's an expression of gratitude. Some people place it at different places. Most of them place it at the end. Others place it right after the first line of the Modim. We go down, let me see. Just a second. Okay, sorry. Okay. So right in the middle of the Modim prayer, which we have the same formulation, Al Chayena B'Surim B'Yedecha, V'Anishmotein HaBedulach, V'Anisecha Shebeyom Imanu, V'Anifotecha Tavatecha Shebel. Some people insert the HaNissim right here, and we continue. Ow, 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 ow. So there's a continuity of terminology, and then HaNissim is under the category of Hoda'ah, and therefore it's like Anisecha Shebechol Yom Imanu, V'Anifotecha V'Tovatecha Shebechol Eit. Then we move to HaNissim. Others people insert it at the end of the bracha. It's cleaner to insert at the end, but it's more relevant to insert it in the middle. Now let's look at the text itself. We have HaNissim Al Purkan, Val Gvurot, Val Teshuot. This is common to almost every version. The HaNissim is continuing the terminology of the Modim prayer. Al Purkan is a phrase for Teshuvah, frequently found in Gaonic prayers, like Vayasmach Purkane Vikari Mishiche, or Yakum Purkan. The Hebrew is Yifrakeni Mitzarenu, but in the form of Purkan is an Aramaic form, and therefore likely of Gaonic composition, when many of the prayers inserted both Hebrew and Aramaic. It goes on to say, Shasita Lavotenu Bayamim Ahem, Ubizman Hazeh, apparently referring to the wonders done to our ancestors. In those days, Bizman Hazeh probably means at the same time of Kaf He Kislev, was exactly the day it took place. Other people add U Bizman Hazeh, and by the U, they tried to argue that it means not only in those days, but in the wonders and miracles taking place in our day. So either we should translate precisely at this time, which I'll explain later on as we go into this, or it's trying to make it relevant to a contemporary situation, arguing that God's wonders and miracles are not a one-time event, but an ongoing event. Okay, then we have the text, which I divide into three parts, who is the major actor? The Greeks, God, or Israel? So the first three lines go, all the Hebrew is simple, but it's very difficult to parse this line. So we don't know when it says Bimei Matityahu ben Yochanan, the Kohen Gadol refers to Matityahu, does it refer to Yochanan? Chashmonai uvanav has to refer to Matityahu. The real problem is, how do you translate Kohen Gadol? So it's very common to translate Kohen Gadol as high priest. The trouble is, there's only one high priest at the time, and we don't know of these names among the high priests of the day. We have the word Menelaus, we have Onias, we have Jason, but we have no Matityahu. So one way of resolving this is that Kohen Gadol does not mean high priest. Kohen Gadol means nothing more than distinguished priest. And that's why we sometimes find the phrase Kohen Gadol in rabbinic literature, describing a Kohen after Churban Beit HaMikdash. So it can't be the Kohen Gadol, it could be a distinguished priest. Now, to support that contention, if you look down at number 2, at the end of Tanakh, in biblical Hebrew, when we refer to the high priest, the phrase is HaKohen HaRosh. So line 2 says, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen HaRosh, from the book of Ezra. Also it says, Vayomer Elav Azariyahu HaKohen HaRosh Leveit Tzadok in Divrei Hayamim. So at the end of the biblical period, the phrase for the high priest was HaKohen HaRosh. Therefore, it could simply be that Kohen Gadol means distinguished priest. And this would refer, because at HaNissim it talks about HaKohanim HaKadoshim, the holy priests. Does not specify a high priest. Therefore, it's likely that the original expression, Kohen Gadol, I don't mean the original expression, but in the liturgy, means a distinguished priest, and therefore there's no contradiction between the Book of Maccabees, which do not mention the name as a high priest, and the rendition here. Okay, line 2. Malchut Yavan Harashah Al Amcha Yisrael. That's the beginning. They specifically chose the verb Amda Malchut Yavan, that when the Greek Empire, Harashah could mean evil, but Rasha can also mean guilty. In rabbinic Hebrew, Rasha, in biblical Hebrew, Rasha is a legal term. In rabbinic Hebrew, Rasha is a moral term. So we say, Hitzdiku et tzaddik, v'yirshu et Rasha, should be translated as, they acquitted the innocent. V'yirshu et Rasha, they convicted the guilty. So what is called tzaddik and Rasha would be in rabbinic Hebrew, Zakai and chayav. This is quite important because Noach ish tzaddik should not be translated as he was a tzaddik. Rather, in light of his generation, he was innocent. He did not deserve to be punished. Similarly, to find Asarat Tzaddikim in Sodom means to find 10 innocent people. You can't find 10 Tzaddikim even in Queens nowadays. How would you find them in Sodom? But they don't deserve to be punished. That's the argument. All this is in forensic language. So Malchut HaRishah could mean the evil kingdom, may also mean the guilty kingdom. It's an expression borrowed from Romi Harasha is also called. There, it could be the evil kingdom of Rome. It could also be that Rome is guilty of having destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, now what were the two things they tried to do? Mashkicham Toratecha v'lavira michukei retzonecha. First, they tried to make them forget the study of Torah. And in fact, we have in the Book of Maccabees descriptions that when they found a Torah in somebody's house, they martyred him on the Torah. And they hanged circumcised babies from the breasts of mothers. So mashkicham Toratecha v'lavira michukei retzonecha. Now follow the poetry here, Toratecha retzonecha, because by virtue of the sound, we have a transition into line 4. Vata, in contrast, barachamecha. Harabim, what did you do? Amarta lahem. The line 4, amarta lahem, goes back to line 2. It's midah keneged midah. Amda machut javan, negatively. Amarta lahem, positively. So God, in a sense, withstood their efforts. Vata barachamecha, and then rachamecha goes back to ritzonecha. So you see the poet operating to make sure that sound-wise, there's a smooth transition from one subject to the other. So although the subject changes, the sound of the words create the links. Now I put a colon there because the function of tzaratam is a transition into the next line. Beit tzaratam. How did you do that? Answer. Rafet rivam, dante dinam, nakamte nikmatam. So the three things all follow the phrase tzaratam, amart lahem. So line 5 specifies what 4 says in a generalization. That is, amart lahem, beit tzaratam. How did you omeid lahem beit tzaratam? In this, rafet rivam, dante dinam, nakamte nikmatam. Then line 6, we change and follow closely. Just like 4 to 5 in the transition has 4 elements. Beit tzaratam, raftet rivam, dante dinam, nakante ikmatam, exactly 4. You'll see exactly 4, number 6. Masarte giborim b'yad chalashim, 1. Rabim b'yad matim, 2. Tamim b'yad torim, 3. Rishim b'yad tzadikim, 4. Now, follow closely. Line 7 could continue. Zaydim, which rhymes with Giborim, which rhymes with Rabim, Tamim, and so on. But here we change. Zaydim, B'yad Oskei Toratecha. Now the question is, who are these people? Are these people the Greeks? Or are these people the Mityavnim? Are we talking about Jews? Or are we talking about non-Jews? So we say, Giborim B'yad Chalashim, we automatically think that they are the Greeks. Rabim b'yad matim, they must have been the Greeks. Teri temeim b'yad toharim, also sounds Greeks. But the last 2 is not so simple. So if we look down in the text, we find 2 expressions here. On number 2, this idea amda, we have already Shmot Rabbah. There it says, Keshamda Edom, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. Siman hazeh yebedchem b'yom shasiti lachem teshuvah boto layla. So with regard to Rome, we have the same expressions we had to the Greeks. Amda, that's a negative part, right? We're contrasted by what? Teshuvah. The negatives did amda, the positives did teshuvah. And the result is, at the end of line 2, hey you, Yudim, shani go'achem. When you see the contrast between what they tried to do to us and how God saved us from them, then you realize that God is our Redeemer. Now look at line 6 there. This is talking about Daniel, those people who tried to remove the sign of being circumcised. Those who played in the gymnasium did not want to be perceived, apparently, as Jewish. The identifying mark was circumcision. So according to the Talmud, hayu moshchim ba'orgatam. So here in line 6, they're called marshi'ei brit. Now this can only be Jews who would undercover their circumcision. Marshi'ei brit apparently means those who wanted to what? Cover up the signs of circumcision. So it could be the Reshaim in the previous line refers to the Jews. What would reinforce that possibility when most of the terms look like they're only talking about the Greeks? So the last one says, V'zeidim b'yad oskei toratecha, line 6. Now, the Zaidim, are they Jewish, the Mityavnim? Because oskei toratecha has to be those who are Jews. So if you look down, we find this expression also here on line 7. We have two phrases here. On line 7, it says, V'heim bavotenu heizidu v'yakshu et arpam v'lo shamu mitzvotecha. So we're talking about those who did not listen to the mitzvot. What is the verb used? Heizidu. Heizidu normally means to perpetrate evil purposely, bizadom. But in the Ezrat Avotenu prayer, it refers to the Mitzrim. Zaidim tibata, v'yedim havarta. There the contrast is, who are the Zaidim? Those are the Egyptian army who's coming to destroy Israel. They, what you do to them, tibata, you drown them. V'yedim havarta, and the Jews, what did you do? You allow them to transit on and pass through the river. So the possibility that the phrase that only means the Greeks, meaning the non-Jews, but may also refer to their allies among the Jews, is a possibility of some of the expressions. We don't have enough expressions which are sufficiently precise to define this or that, but the possibility of using expressions which could go both ways is very possible with regard to Rishaim, b'yad Tzadikim, and Zaidim, b'yad Oskei Toratecha. Now the phrase Toratecha is specifically chosen because what did they want to do? The Greeks wanted to do what? Mashkicham. Look at the phrase. Here, line 3. Mashkicham Toratecha. So someone use the expression to identify loyal Jews. We use it again to define loyal Jews. So Mashkicham Toratecha, they failed, and what did the Jews remain? Oskei Toratecha. Now the word osek is not an easy word to define because sometimes it means to study Torah, sometimes it means to perform Torah. So in the Berchot HaShachar in the morning, we have lasok b'divrei Torah. Does that mean to study Torah? Or does it also mean to comply with it, to perform it? Oskei Toratecha. Apparently the word is also chosen precisely because many other verb would either mean to study or to do, and apparently oskei Toratecha can mean both. So Rabbi Meir in Avot says, Hevei mima'et be'esek v'asok b'Torah, almost a pen. Hevei mima'et be'esek v'asok b'Torah, I would translate, minimize business and busy yourself with Torah. Busy yourself with Torah can mean, of course, the study of or the compliance with. Okay, now line 8. Lecha asita, because you did all this, and the defeat of Zaidim b'yad oskei Toratecha, lecha asita shem gadol v'kadosh b'olamecha. Now, where do we know this expression, gadol v'kadosh? Well, we know it from the Yishtabach. The opening line says gadol v'kadosh. We put the word shame on it. It's hard not to think of Yidgadal, v'Yidkadash, Shemei Rabbah. And what's the very next word in the Kaddish? Bi'alma. So shame, gadol, v'kadosh, b'olamecha is equivalent to the opening line of the Kaddish, Yidgadal, gadol, Yidkadash, kadosh, Shemei Rabbah, shame, be'alma bo'lamecha. So there we ask God to make his name Gadol v'Kadosh, and here we express gratitude to God for having done already. Asita Shem Gadol v'Kadosh bo'lamecha. And how did you do this? Ki lamcha Yisrael asita teshua gedola ufurkan kayam hazeh. So line 9 is really beautiful because it goes back to the opening introduction and summarizes the major terms there. It's just teshua and furkan. So it's like a concluding part of the beginning prayer, and it's well constructed by having the last line recapitulate the opening line with regard to God's activities. Now, line 10. This is no longer God doing things. It is now Israel doing things. Now, we should really understand this because normally in prayer, we downplay the human element and we upgrade the divine element. So, for example, in the prayer Az Yashir, Moses does nothing except praise God, sing. In the previous chapter 14 of Exodus, Moses does almost everything. So in the chapter 14, Moses is primary. God plays a secondary role. In Az Yashir, the primary role, almost the exclusive role of activity is God, and everybody else is passive or praising God, simply because chapter 14 of Shemot is history. Chapter 15 of Shemot is liturgy. When it comes to liturgy, we focus upon God alone and not the human element. This is taken so seriously that even in Echa, which talks about the structure of the temple, there's no mention of Nebuchadnezzar, no mention of Bavel, because Echa is liturgical. So the sole actor is who? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This also explains the absence of Moshe doing anything, although he's cited in a pasuk in the Haggadah. The Haggadah is understood liturgically. Therefore, the focus is upon divine activity, not upon human activity. Okay, so we go down to line 8 to repeat. Yitkedal v'yitkeda shemei rabba b'yama, and the expression is found quite often. I give you two examples here. Kadesh et shemcha al makdishei shemecha, kadesh et shemcha b'olamecha. So this idea of doing kiddush Hashem b'olamecha repeats over and over again. So Yitkedal v'yitkeda shemei rabba b'alma, kadesh et shemcha makdishei shemecha b'olamecha. Now, Kadesh Shemcha Makdishei Shemecha is a kind of a pun. It's like saying is, God, sanctify your name on those who sanctify your name. So by us sanctifying God's name, by saying later on, Kadosh, 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 we ask God to sanctify his name by means of us. God sanctifies his name by means of us, by redeeming. So the next line says, Ubishuatcha, Tarim, Tagbir Tarnenu. So again, Yeshua, Baruch atah Hashem HaMakadesh im Shemcha Berabim. Okay, now the very last line. What does it end? So the HaNissim ends with 5 things. This is in the year 164, exactly 3 years after 167, when the war started, precisely on the 25th of Kislev. What did they do? Finu techalecha, they cleared it out. They re-sanctified it by purifying it. They lit candles in your courtyards. And they fixed these 8 days of Hanukkah. Now, if you read that, why are there 8 days of Hanukkah? Everybody knows, but it doesn't say it. So therefore, you think it says it. But it says kavush moimin. Why? So the fact is, on the same day, I understood. Clear. But why kavush moimin? And where does the language come from? So we're going to see what happens here. We compare with the Book of Maccabees. And the last one is lodot hamer l'shimcha gadol. Normally, they translate lodot means to express gratitude, and halel to praise. But I'm inclined to believe that these are really technical terms. And when we say lahodot, we mean to say, Hodu Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chasdo. And where do you say that in? the Hallel. So Lahodot does not mean just say to express thanks. It means to say Hodu. And Lahalel means to say the Hallel. Psalm 113 to 118. And who do we say it to? L'shimcha hagadol. And why do we say, God, why do we say Shimcha Gadol? Because line 8 says, Lachasita Shem Gadol B'Kadosh B'Lamecha. So the repetition of the words shows you how tightly constructed this prayer is. It is a very strong sense of historical events, a very strong sense of poetry. It is intensely condensed, and it focuses upon the three elements. What did the Greeks do? What did God do? And what did Israel do to justify our present practice of this holiday? Okay, now we're moving on to Book of Maccabees 1:18. As you read through the Book of Maccabees, I want you to reflect upon how many of the expressions here are found in the HaNissim. So the first one is quite easy. 1 Maccabees 1:18, Judah said, "It is easy for many to be delivered into the hands of the few." Sounds like a straight translation of what? Rabim, B'yad Meitim. Because heaven sees no difference in gaining victory through the many or through the few. Then it goes on to say, what did the Greeks do? They said, so as to forget the Torah and violate all the commandments. This is Maccabees 1, chapter 1, verse 49. To forget the Torah, which is exactly our expression, l'shakcham o lashkicham mitoratecha, v'laviram michukei retzonecha. So the book, the HaNissim, almost translates the book of Maccabees straight into Hebrew. L'shakcham or lashkicham, to forget and violate, which is l'shakcham v'laviram, almost word for word. Then it says, so Judah appointed unblemished priests. Unblemished priest technically means a Kohen who has no mum, which would posel him from functioning in the Avodah. But here it could also probably mean those Kohanim who did not participate in the Hellenist worship of Dionysius, which was the cult of the king of Syria. And we know they did it because they would tameh the altar. And we know that the high priestly families of Onias, Menelaus, and Jason were some of the greatest advocates of Hellenizing. In fact, it seems to be a correlation between the higher you were up socially in Jerusalem and politically, the closer you were to the Greek rulers, and the more likely you were to emulate their ways and have disdain for the rule ways of ancient Judaism. So what did they do? They purified the sanctuary, straight out of HaNissim, except in reverse. Removed the defiled stones into an unclean place. They deliberated what to do with the profaned altar, because they had sacrificed this altars to an alternative god. They couldn't use it anymore. So what did they do? They tore it down and stored it in the temple until, listen closely, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. So they're admitting there are no prophets in our day. We don't know what to do with a mizbeach, which has been defiled. We cannot use it to put our korbanot on them. On the other hand, we can't destroy it. So what do? We tore it down and we stored it, hoping that someday somebody will tell us what to do with them. Then, taking uncut stones as prescribed by the Torah, they built a new altar after the pattern of the old. They repaired the sanctuary, hallowed the interior of the house and courts, almost identical to line 11 and 12 above in the HaNissim. So HaNissim goes back to look at 11. It says, "Finu et heichalecha, v'tiaru et mikdashecha." So what does the Book of Maccabees say? They repaired the sanctuary and hallowed the interior of the house and courts, chatzor kachecha, almost word for word. And they made new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick, the menorah, an altar of burnt offerings of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, lit the lamps on the lampstand, then they light to the temple. Again, what? They lit the candles, but no correlation between 8 and the lighting of the candles. So HaNissim underscores the 8. We don't know why 8. Here they have a similar phenomenon, but they don't mention the 8. So what happened here? Let's see what happens. So the next line goes on to say, chapter 4, verse 54 of 1 Maccabees. Says, at that very time of the year, on that very day, almost a direct translation of Bayamim Ahem, Bazman Hazeh, on which the Gentiles had profaned the altar, and it was dedicated to the sound of singing, almost like the end of HaNissim, Urananim. The entire people prostrated themselves and bowed and gave thanks to heaven. Now listen closely. This is the Book of Maccabees. For 8 days, they celebrated the dedication of the altar joyfully. So in the Book of Maccabees, we have Hanukkah lasting exactly 8 days. Why 8 days? It doesn't explain why 8 days. But in the other Book of Maccabees, 2 expressions are used. One is called Hanukkah de Sukkot. What's Hanukkah de Sukkot? It means that if we now dedicate the temple in the month of Kislev, it means 3 months earlier, during Tishrei, the Mikdash was not on our hands. If the Mikdash was on our hands, we could not observe Sukkot. So one explanation is 8 days are Tashlumim. We are compensating for the absence of observing Sukkot because the Mikdash was not in our hands. So therefore, since Sukkot is 8 days, 7 plus 1, therefore Hanukkah is 8 days. The second explanation is the original Chanukat Bayit in the time of Shlomo also lasted 8 days. So the argument is, if we're going to rededicate the temple, Chanukat Bayit, we should follow the model of the first one. Just like the first one was 8 days, so this one will be 8 days. Now, this is amazing because if you look at the explanation in the Talmud, it says the following. My Hanukkah. The Tanu Rabbanan. B'kafei b'Kislev, Yemei Hanukkah, how many are they? Timnaya. The number is 8 days. Inu dela lemispeid bahon, udela litanot bahem. We're not allowed to give hespedim, and we're not allowed to fast. What happened? Now we have a story. K'shenichnesu Yavanim lechal, timu kol hashmanim shebechal. They defiled all the shmanim, the oils in the sanctuary. Then we have a line which comes almost straight out of the Book of Maccabees, Kishagavra Malchut Beit Hashmonai Venitzchum, which is remarkable because Malchut Beit Hashmonai is the result of the war. So maybe by the time they vanquished them, it was the restoration of the kingship of the Hashmonim. And what do they do? Nitzchum. So Nitzchum, the mem at the end, has to go back to the word Yevanim in the line before. Who do they? They defeated them. What happened? But they found only 1 pach of shemen. Apparently, to make sure that it was not defiled, there was some signet, chotmo, a signet of the Kohen Gadol on it, means it had not been broken into. It's like you buy something, a product in the grocery store, now it says, if this has been open, return it. It only had enough oil for what? 1 day? What was it, 8? The oil lasted for 8 days. Now, listen to the lines. Leshana acheret, in the next year, apparently, kvaum, which is the exact same word we have in HaNissim. Kavu, shmoni, and kailu. So it says, kvaum, vasaum, yamim tovim. What's the last 2 words? V'halel u'b'hoda, which are equivalent to the phrase in HaNissim, l'hodot, and what? L'halel. So it's remarkable here is you have for the HaNissim language, which is clearly borrowed from the Talmud. Yamim tovim b'halel u'b'hoda. We have the word kav'u, right? On the other hand, we have in the HaNissim many expressions borrowed from the Book of Maccabees. It's almost like the author of HaNissim had in front of him some version of the Book of Maccabees, either in Greek, which is unlikely, maybe Hebrew, Aramaic, maybe Gilat Antiochus, or anything else, we don't know for sure. And he had in front of him also the Talmudic report. And he wanted to do what? Borrow language from both. Now the question is, why? So now we look at the last part here. It says, Tanu Rabbanan. Mitzvah Hanukkah, how is it observed? Ner ish uveto. Ner apparently means one lantern. We now use the word candle, but candles weren't in those days. One lantern, each one for his household. Now, what do the Mahadrim do? Those who are careful, meticulous. Ner l'chol echad v'echad. Each person lights his own. So apparently, instead of saying ish uveto, one for the whole household, each member lights what? One. Now comes the most remarkable thing. HaMahadrim and HaMahadrim, those who are extra makpid. Mahadrim and HaMahadrim. What does it say? Beit Shammai omrim, Yom Rishon madlik shmona, mikan ve'elech pochet volech. Says Beit Shammai, on the first day, what do? We light 8. Then what do? We descend. So it's in descending order. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What does Beit Hillel say? Yom Rishon madlik achat. On the opening day, we light 1. Mikan ve'elech mosif volech. And every day we do what? We add 1. Now the Talmud gives 2 explanations for this, but I'm focusing upon the second one. The second was Talmud of Beit Shammai keneged parei hachag. What question is he answering? Why does Beit Shammai say we do it in descending order? Why do we start with 8 and go down to 1? So he tells you it's keneged parei hachag, just like the korbanot of Sukkot, which start with 70, are in decline. So the lighting of the candle, or the lighting of the menorah, the way it is lit, not the fact that it is lit, corresponds to the ceremony done in Beit HaMikdash on Sukkot. There, just like the number went down, so does the number here go down, which means Beit Shammai is the old conservative position. By conservative position, I mean they saw Hanukkah in correspondence to Sukkot, which means it's rooted in its historical origins. And therefore, how should you celebrate Hanukkah? Well, you don't offer up korbanot, but therefore you do something which corresponds to what they did in the Beit HaMikdash. And if Parei HaChag declined in number, so should the Ner decline in number. Makes perfect sense. What about Hillel? Talmud of Beit Hillel is remarkable. The Malim b'Kodesh ve'ein moridim. Now, what does that have to do with what we're talking about? Malim b'Kodesh means things which are of a sanctified nature. We can upgrade them, but we don't downgrade them. By downgrading, I mean go down the number. Now, what is he talking about? Is he talking about Parei HaChag? Is he talking about the ancient Beit HaMikdash? Where do you get this idea from? Beit Shammai, it makes perfect sense, because if Hanukkah is a Hanukkah de Sukkot, then we take the model of Sukkot and we perform the ritual following the model. And that's how we do most things. So, for example, why do we eat matzah on Pesach? Because they did it. In other words, many things we do is to perpetuate the memory of what our forefathers did. So to some degree, ritual is continuity. We establish continuity between our practice and their practice. Therefore, we identify with them as they express gratitude for redemption. We express gratitude for redemption. That's a very common way of structuring Jewish ritual. What about Beit Hillel? First, he has this strange idea of Malim b'Kodesh ve'ein moridim, number 1. 2, he applies it to the Hanukkah menorah, which is the word kadosh is very strange, because even though we say Kodesh Haim, the word Kodesh Haim does not really mean they are holy, because then all the types of rules would kick in. The word Kodesh frequently means off limits. Hekdesh, when you dedicate something to the temple, you no longer have access to it. So Hekdesh means dedicated to the temple, off limits, therefore I cannot get benefit from it. Therefore, the phrase Kodesh is defining Ein Lanu Rashut Lishtamesh Behem, because once it's Kodesh, it's off limits. It cannot be used to benefit ourselves. So that definition of Ein Lanu Rashut Lishtamesh Behem is defining what do we mean by Kodesh Haim, Kodesh Haim. So my theory is, and tell me what you think of this, that Hillel, while Beit Shammai is the conservative position and wants to reenact the ancient ritual, and the function of ritual is reenactment, Hillel has an alternative position. Why is it going up, not down? Because the wonder of the day is going up. Every day that light continues, the wonder grows. So instead of reenacting the original ritual, we reenact the human expression and response to the original ritual. The original practice, our wonder grew every day. So instead of reenacting the lighting, we reenact the wonder. As the wonder grows from 1 to 8, we light from 1 to 8, as it were. As Beit Hillel says, no. What ritual means, reenactment of ancient practices. And now we got two theories of ritual reenactment. One is you reenact the human response. Other is you reenact what was actually done. One says Keneged Parei Chag, and one says Mali B'Kodesh Ve'ein Moridim. Okay, so all this is found in the Anera Talala Anu Madrikim, and I want to emphasize several expressions here. You'll see the opening line HaNissim Hanukkah is just like the opening line of HaNissim. B'yamim ha'hem b'zman hazeh, almost identical. Instead of Matityo Yochanan, we have Ayedei Kohanecha Kedoshim, which solves the whole problem of how can Matityo or Yochanan be called a Kohen Gadol if a Kohen Gadol means high priest. Then we have the 8 days. Okay, so all 8 days, these candles, I'm translating, are off limits. What does off limits mean? And what is the function? Kedei lahodot ulaleh l'shimcha gadol, which is the same lashon of the end of HaNissim, lahodot ulaleh l'shimcha gadol. Okay, now final point. What did HaNissim achieve? Because in the Jewish history, we have two theories of why we celebrate Hanukkah 8 days. One is corresponding to Sukkot, or corresponding to the original Hanukkah Tabayit. The second theory is that the Neirot, or the light, was enough, or the Neshaman was enough for 1 day, and it lasted 8 days. So we got two theories. One is advocated by the Book of Maccabees. One is advocated by the Talmud. What is the position of HaNissim? So look at the last two lines of HaNissim. If you look at the last two, now I'm saying this because I talk about my own experience. For years, whenever I said the line 13, I just assume we're talking about what? Nes Hashemin. For years I thought that. It never occurred to me otherwise. It is only when I began to read the Book of Maccabees and found out that part is missing there, but the observance of 8 days is underscored in the Book of Maccabees, I began to realize that the prayer is navigating between two positions. In other words, there are those who follow the Book of Maccabees and say what? The 8 days corresponds to Sukkot, or the number of days for Chanukah Tabayit. There are those who say the 8 days refer to Nes Hashemin. Apparently, HaNissim does not want to divide the Jewish people. So if you can formulate it in such a manner that everybody thinks their own position is there, then Shalom Yisrael. And if you think about it, it's sheer genius. So you say, everybody who believes in Nes Hashemin says, oh, there it is. Those who follow the Book of Maccabees and said, Nes Hashemin, I don't know whether it happened or not, that's not the issue, but we still observe the 8 days because it's Chanukah Tabayit. And Chanukah Tabayit, biblically speaking, was 8 days. So the result of HaNissim is that the whole Jewish people, whatever their historical background is, will observe 8 days. They can commemorate it by lighting candles because everybody agrees they needed light in the Beit HaMikdash. And Shalom Yisrael, it allowed for the Jewish people, in my opinion, to hold two different positions, believe that both position was validated, and in doing so, keeping Klal Yisrael together for Shalom Yisrael. Okay, that's our shiur on HaNissim, its structure, its choice of terminology, to what degree it borrows or relies upon the Book of Maccabees, to what degree it relies upon the Talmudic report, tries to combine both to be, as it were, l'chol ha'deot. And then we went to the Gemara part, emphasizing Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, and I'm emphasizing that Beit Shammai goes back to the Sukkot model, therefore Keneged Parei Chag, and Talmud Beit Hillel is talking, I assume, about the miracle of the lighting of the candles, where the wonder grows every single day, and since the wonder grows every single day, he coined, or at least used the expression, Malim Bakodesh Ve'ein Moridim. Okay, now let's open up for questions, comments, reflections, or alternative positions. Please, who's ever, Scott, you want to, or no, you got.
Rabbi Kimelman, if you don't mind, just continue sharing your screen, please.
Oh, yes, please. Okay.
And then I'll be able to see. I think we have one.
Okay, wonderful.
I see. Yeah, then we can see you. And we have a question in the chat from Mitch Morrison. Question for Rabbi Kimelman. On the Shammai position of 8 days of declining order, truth is in Israel, Sukkot is 7 days of declining. Shemini Atzeret features only a single carbon and is not part of the sequential descent. So how would we justify a perfect parallelism between Sukkot versus 8 days of Hanukkah?
Well, your kushya, as it were, is should be asked to Beit Shammai. But what he's saying is, Parei Chag, the Midrash emphasizes the significance of one korban of Shmini Atzeret. It's like God welcomes everybody to a wedding, but then has a yichud or a private meal with the Jewish people. From any point of view, the idea that Parei Chag, it was declining, and it could fit in because you could say that the shemen, which burned the first day, was no miracle, because everybody what? There was enough shemen. So the miracle was not 8 days, the miracle was only 7 days. That would correspond to her perfectly. Okay, what else?
Noah Grodowski wrote, I'd be interested in some evidence of lehodot ulahalel being a reference to recitation of Hallel in particular.
Oh, you frequently have in the liturgy a 1 or 2 word phrase which refers to a whole prayer. I think I mentioned in the previous shiur on Kaddish, Birchata, Birchata, Shirata, Tishbechata, Venechemata. And I showed how Birchata refers back to Baruch Shamar, Shirata az Yashir, Tishbechata is Tushbacho, Yishtabach, the 3 things which are preceded. And the last word, Nechamata, the Chet and Ayin are Otiot Mitchalfot, that refers to the word Ni'imata. And the Nimot Le'el Baruch Nimo Itenu is in the next bracha of Kriyat Shema. And the function of these 4 words in the Kaddish is to bridge the Psukei de Zimra with the Shema. But the same methodology appears in the Havinenu prayer, a kind of abbreviation of the Amidah, in which a single expression, or sometimes even a single word, is used to refer to a whole prayer of the middle 13 blessings. And the same ideology, or the same methodology, is found in Magen Avot on Friday night, where we end with Me'ein HaBrachot, and every expression which preceded it is summarizing a paragraph of the Amidah. So this use of a term now could mean as be nothing more to say thank you and to praise. But I wouldn't be surprised, and of course I cannot prove this beyond the evidence I just provided, that these are technical terms. It's not only lahodo, and therefore you have hodu Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chesdo, which fits in perfectly here. And lahalel would not just be to praise God, but to articulate, which is already done in the Gaonim, that on Hanukkah we say what? We say Hallel. So I'm putting this forward as a theory. I think it has some degree of credibility. It is not watertight.
Rabbi Kimelman, we have a question in the chat from Jack Wasserman. He says that the Book of Maccabees is not included in our holy books, Septuagint. Why is that, and why do you cite it?
What's the last 4 words?
And why do you cite it?
Oh. First, the Book of Maccabees does appear in the Christian Bible, which is probably based upon the Jewish Hellenistic Bible. Our Bible does not include it probably for three reasons. Reason number one is the belief that Paskah HaNevuah, that after the Persian Empire, Nevuah stopped. Therefore, you no longer have a book in Ruach HaKodesh. Therefore, it cannot be linked to the Bible. And therefore, anything which is defined as post-Persian, that is in the Greek period, automatically gets excluded. The only exception to this may have been Ben Sira. Ben Sira is referred to in Talmud, Dichtiv. The fact that you have Dichtiv makes some people think it was part of the Ketuvim. And Hellenistic Jewry put it in their Ketuvim. And the Christian Bible is based upon the Hellenistic Jewish Bible. Now, but it's independent we're talking about. Hanukkah is not a biblical holiday. So the whole issue of biblicism is not the issue here. Hanukkah is a post-biblical holiday. We have no Masechet Hanukkah in the Talmud. We have Masechet Megillah. So Hanukkah is a post-biblical holiday, and its significance is how do we create ritual which is not in the Bible? We do not have like Pesach, whole things what to do. So the Gemara there, in Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, they're trying to say, well, how do we commemorate, which means how do we ritualize Hanukkah when we have no clear biblical precedent because Hanukkah does not appear there. So the only thing we have is the Book of Hanukkah, the Book of Maccabees, which many people think was originally written in Hebrew, translated into Greek, and then the Hebrew got lost. So the two simple reasons why the Book of Hanukkah, means Maccabees, is not in the Bible is one, it's not in Hebrew, it was only in Greek. Two, it was after the period of the Nevuah, Paskah Nevuah, therefore not Ruach HaKodesh, therefore not part of the canon. Nonetheless, books of Bayit Sheni can be used to illuminate the historical period of the time. Otherwise, we know almost nothing about the period of the Maccabees, except for the Book of Maccabees.
There's another question in the chat from Rabbi Leonard Levy. Are you dating HaNissim to the Gaon because of the word Porkan? It's also used in the Gemara regarding requirements of the Ketubah.
Yeah, Porkan is a late word. For the Hebrew Teshua, but it's not only that. The first HaNissim first appears in Gaonic works. We do not have it in the Talmud. HaNissim is a little bit like the Kaddish. We have no reference to that in Talmudic literature. Now, I'm using Masechet Sofrim is also probably Gaonic, quite late. Therefore, probably post, let's say, 650, post 700, more likely, 900. Sometimes we can confirm this by finding things in the Geniza. There's a great debate whether anything in the Geniza precedes the year 800 or not. So we have it, Sidur Amar Gaon, Natronai Gaon, HaNissim, Kaddish, prayers which were composed in the Gaonic period, probably by the Gaonim. Clearly, this is a genius, in my opinion, formulation of the issues of Hanukkah, which is an extraordinary economy of expression, very serious attention to poetry, sound, and the convergence of sound and sense makes it the beautiful prayer it is.
I'm going to take one more question, okay? I think it's always good to leave people wanting more. All right. I wonder if Rabbi Kimelman can offer his thoughts on the behind-the-scenes challenges it may have been to introduce a new prayer, HaNissim, into a prayer that was already well established, the Shemona Esrei. In other words, I wonder how challenging it may have been to reopen the Shemona Esrei to add another prayer.
That is a difficult problem, but it's multi-dimensional. The last prayer that was probably added to the Amidah is Sim Shalom. In Talmudic literature, that prayer is called Birkat Kohanim. In Amoraic literature, it's called Sim Shalom. I think what happened was the original Amidah ended with the Modim prayer. It ends V'chol HaChayim Yoducha Selah. So the prayer begins Modim Anachnu Lach, which is what we're doing. Then it hopes for the day when all humanity will join us in acknowledging God. V'chol HaChayim Yoducha Selah. So the Modim prayer, its two parts are structured identically to the Aleinu prayer. The Aleinu L'Shabech Adon HaKol talks about us. The second paragraph of Aleinu, Al Kain, Nekavel L'Ro B'Tiferet Uzecha, and Lavir Kol Rishei Aretz. So the two parts of the Aleinu first starts with us recognizing God, then all recognizing God is parallel to the Modim. That's why the Modim prayer, if you look at it, has nothing distinctly Jewish about it. It's rather the expression for gratitude, Al Nisacha v'niflotecha shebechol yom imanu, which means people expressing praise to God for the wonders of the human experience. And that is open to all. Therefore, all humanity will call upon God. Now, if that was the end prayer, and later on they added Birkat Kohanim to increase the correspondence between synagogue prayer and the prayer of the Mikdash, since Birkat Kohanim is mentioned in Mishnah Tamid, then Birkat Kohanim became the end. But Birkat Kohanim ends with the phrase, V'yasem lecha shalom. Well, that's a blessing and a hope. So what's the prayer say? Sim shalom. If you say, V'yasem lecha shalom, then, oh Lord, please do it. Sim shalom. So I think Sim shalom was added after Birkat Kohanim was added, which means that there was a time, B'chol HaChaim, in the expectation of all humanity recognizing God's sovereignty, ended the prayer as a high point. So the HaNissim, it's easy to add to a prayer at the end rather than insert a prayer in the middle. But the other reason is the Yaleh v'Yavo is limited to those chagim which have korbanot. Yaleh v'Yavo v'Yagia v'Yiratzeh. All these words are coming to the Beit HaMikdash. Yiratzeh is ritzui korbanot. Yagia. This is afterwards because Modim is called Hoda'ah. So over historical events in which God's salvific power was experienced, we express Hoda'ah. Now, why didn't it meet more opposition? Sometimes things do not meet opposition because they're beautifully constructed. Sometimes they have great authorities behind them. Sometimes the deficiency is, comes Hanukkah, what are you going to say, nothing? You have to say something. So the need for a prayer is so beautifully constructed, supported by the Gaonim, written in classical Hebrew, put it close to the very end, and then mimicked by Purim, because apparently when Ha'ala Milchamot does not apply to Purim, so Purim took the introductory beginning, and we made Hanukkah and Purim holidays of Hoda'ah, because on both we are saved. Now, whether we're saved and afterwards we eat is a later phenomenon, not necessarily part of the Siddur. Okay?
Rabbi Kimelman, as always, a tremendous, tremendous thank you. Your presentation are always really, I would have to say, mind-blowing. We thoroughly enjoyed them. And I have to say, we've been running these UTJ webinars for the last 2 years, and yours always get a tremendous turnout. Your scholarship, your insight is just really amazing, and we appreciate your willingness to present to our group. So thank you so much. We hope that everybody enjoyed this presentation. We hope that you enjoyed the rest of Hanukkah. We've sent links in the chat to join our mailing list and to provide feedback on tonight's presentation. Thank you everybody again for being here, and have a Chag Urim Sameach, a Freilich and Hanukkah, and we hope to see you soon.
Chag Urim Sameach.
Happy
Thank
Hanukkah.
you
Thank you so much. Amazing.
Thank you.